So if biology is the study of living things, then defining what living means is going to be pretty important. So that's what this next section is about. All of these things are alive. And a lot of these pretty obviously alive, like, a tree's alive, the adorable hamster is alive, right? There's some other things that we're going to talk about throughout the year that are going to make you think, is it really alive though? So in order to be alive, something has to have all of 7 characteristics. The first is that it has to have a specific order and structure. And the most basic unit of order is the cell. Okay? A cell is made out of millions of molecules, all organized in a specific way. And we'll talk about what that is later. And all living things have this basic unit of order that we call the cell. Next up is something we call homeostasis, which means steady state. And that means that all living things are able to maintain an internal environment that is separate and different from the external environment. Now, the most simple way to think of this is body temperature. Your body temperature is usually warmer than it is outside, but definitely different from whatever it is outside. That is homeostasis in the human body. Even for organisms that don't keep their body temperature different from the outside environment, there are many differences, for example, in the ions dissolved inside the fluids inside the cell versus outside the cell. And this is something that even single-celled organisms do. They make a different internal environment than external environment. Growth and development. All living things grow and develop during their lifetime, and that development is controlled by DNA. All living things have a metabolism, meaning that they use energy from the environment and they emit heat. A lot of them also emit, and almost all living things emit some kind of waste. For humans, our most basic waste is CO2 plus poop. But all living things at least emit heat. They respond to the environment. They can respond and react to changes in the outside environment, outside of cells. We do this in a number of complicated ways, but even single-celled organisms can move toward or away from sources of food. Reproduction. Now, we often teach this as being able to make more of your own kind, which is true, but then we get into a really weird thing when we start talking about some hybrid organisms, such as a mule, which is a cross between a donkey and a horse, and a mule is sterile. It can't create another mule by mating with a mule. The only way you get another mule is by crossing a horse and a donkey. So it's better to say that living things are produced by reproduction rather than that they can reproduce. Plus, lots of organisms are sterile. That's a thing that happens sometimes for a number of reasons. So easier to think of it in terms of all living things were produced by reproduction, produced by one of their own kind. And DNA provided the template for that reproduction. The last property of life is the only one that applies only to populations of organisms and not to individual organisms. So everything else applies to each individual in any given species or population of organisms. Evolution is something that individuals don't do, although every individual is the product of evolution. But all organisms, all groups of organisms, change over generations. The DNA in the gene pool changes from generation to generation, meaning that some traits become more common and other traits become less common. Beneficial characteristics increase in a population because they help individuals survive and reproduce. Remember that individuals do not evolve. You as an individual, you have a certain set of DNA that you're born with, and I'm sorry, you're stuck with it. It doesn't change during your lifetime. So all of those things are required for something to be alive. So let's compare a rock to the rock. A rock is not composed of cells. Rocks don't have any specific organization the way living things do. It is not produced by other rocks making copies of themselves. They don't obtain energy from their environment, and rocks don't poop. They don't sense or respond to their environment. They don't maintain a constant internal environment. They don't evolve. They are not alive. Now, viruses are interesting. Viruses are not made of cells. They can't reproduce themselves, and they're not produced by other viruses. They're produced by the cells that they infect. So the way you get new viruses is that the virus infects a cell. That cell makes the proteins and DNA that make up the virus, and then gets so full of the virus that it actually bursts and destroys itself and releases the virus. But so viruses can't reproduce, and they're not created by reproduction. They're created by the cellular mechanisms within a cell. Viruses don't obtain energy from the environment. They don't poop. They don't maintain a constant internal environment that's different from the outside. There is some evidence that they respond to their environment. We say no, but maybe they do a little bit, maybe they don't. Maybe mostly no, but maybe yes. They do evolve, though. They absolutely evolve, which is how we get new viruses and new variants of existing viruses. Because viruses evolve. Evolution is a change in DNA, and as they get copied, mistakes get made in that DNA, and the virus changes. So are viruses alive? No, because they only have one, I don't know, maybe possibly two. There's more research going on that. In order to be alive, you have to have all the characteristics of life. Now, fungus, mushrooms, yeast, those are all funguses. Cellular, reproduce themselves, obtain energy from the environment. Yeah, they eat things. Mushrooms eat dead organic matter in the soil. They respond to their environment. They maintain homeostasis. They evolve. They're alive. Plants, same deal. Totally alive. Animals, completely alive. Now, I'm going to post a video of a plant looking really dead. So there is a question, even among all of these living things, between when is it alive and when is it actually dead, the individual living thing. That can be a tough thing to figure out because we know there are a lot of things that go into a sort of stasis when conditions suit. We'll talk more about that later. All right, next up, we're going to talk about what evolution is and what it isn't.